Okay, welcome everyone to this Buildable Lands Report Stakeholders meeting, Thursday, March 17th, 3 p.m. Oliver, do you want to begin with the welcome and introductions?
Yes, thank you, Jose, and thank you everyone that is joining us. You're very welcome taking time out of your busy schedule to join us. What I would like us to do is just quickly, we don't know everyone that is joining us and I cannot see everyone. So I would just turn it over to Jose and who is the host, who can see who is on and maybe who is on the phone as well, and be able to call on someone or each one of you to introduce yourself. And if you can tell us who you are affiliated with or just ordinary citizen, a guest, someone interested in this topic, just Jose, I'll turn it over to you. As you can see, most people just call people by name and have them introduce themselves and who they are affiliated with. So thank you. Again, thank you everyone for participating.
Okay, thanks, Oliver. Got a few people in attendance, so someone at the number of 266-696-687. You want to introduce yourself? Okay. How about Ava Lee Scarpelli?
Hello, Ava Lee Scarpelli, Building Industry Association of Clark County.
All right, Bob Poole's next.
Bob Poole, Jazz Manager for Clark County, Washington.
Okay. Brian Snodgrass.
Hi, Brian Snodgrass. Whoops, muted. Brian Snodgrass for the City of Vancouver.
Thank you, Brian. Claire Lust.
Hi, Claire Lust, City of Ridgefield.
Okay. David McDonald.
David McDonald, Bill Pack member, Friends of Clark County.
Chad Aiken.
Hi, everybody. Chad Aiken, City of Vancouver.
And Eric Alimo.
Eric Alimo, SGA Engineering.
Jackie Lane.
Jackie Lane, mostly private citizen, also with Friends of Clark County.
Jackie Camp.
Hi, everybody. Jackie Camp with Clark County Community Planning.
Jennifer Baker.
Good afternoon, Jennifer Baker with the Columbia River Economic Development Council.
Okay. Lindsay.
I'm Lindsay Hewer. I'm the policy analyst for the County Council.
We've heard from Oliver.
Yes, Oliver Ojako, Community Planning Director, Clark County.
Robert Mall.
Hello, everybody. Robert Mall, City of Camas.
Okay. Ron Barca.
Ron Barca, Build Pack member.
Sam Crummett.
Afternoon, Sam Crummett, City of Battleground.
I think that's everyone I've got that's in attendance.
Jose, we have someone online on the 266-696. I'm not sure the phone number, but I hope the person can identify him or herself.
I don't know if you can hear me. This is Carol Lebanon for Clark County Citizens United.
Hi, Carol. We can hear you. Thank you.
We can hear you, Carol. Thank you.
Okay, let's get to the agenda. Okay, so the welcome and introductions. We are going to have Bob Poole do a VBLM overview, and then discuss some of the feedback comments that we've received regarding the ground truthing, and having a discussion regarding that. And then we're just going to open up for general question and discussion after that, and then the next steps, and hopefully be done by 5. Okay, Bob.
Okay. Can I share my screen?
Go for it.
All right, so you can see my screen. So Jose asked me to kind of show the presentation I showed before back to council. I made a few changes to it to kind of address some of the stuff you guys brought up. Again, you'll see I talk about this being a QA/QC map versus ground truthing, because in my mind, ground truthing is looking at your forecast to your actuals. You forecast how many houses you're going to get. You check and see how many houses you got on the ground and see how those match. We're really not looking at a forecast to actuals in here. People are kind of, at this point in the process, we're really looking at, did I get the rules right? Because we adopted the rules back in June. So I think we have time to turn off rules, but we really don't have time to be creating new rules. We kind of need to be wrapping this process up. So it's very late in the game to be saying we're ground truthing. That was something we did back in the bill pack time frame. So with that in mind, I kind of want to go over some of the stuff that I saw in the comments. First and foremost, kudos to Brian at the City of Vancouver. He did find an error, and it was in how some of the industrial lands were shaded on the map. It did not affect the reporting, but it did show some things incorrectly. But if you clicked on them, they did have the correct values on them. I really received no challenges to how I interpreted the rules and applied them. Nobody said, you know, this golf course should have been vacant based on the rules or anything like that. Everybody had more questions of why the model is calling things something, not really that I wasn't following the rules correctly. And with that in mind, I kind of want to help people understand the model a little better. First and foremost, the model is comprehensive plan based, not zoning based, not zoning overlay based. And that stuff's way more current than comprehensive plan. So people were confused that zoning, it was not respecting zoning. And that's because it's comprehensive plan based. And I'll get back to that. The other thing people were confused about was model timing. Since we are working on the buildable lands report, we are sticking with the 2021 VBLM because that's what we're using for the buildable lands report. In theory, we could be running, we have run the 2022 VBLM, but that's not what we're talking about for the buildable lands report. The other thing to remember is this is just an estimate of capacity. It's not an exact prediction of what's going to happen on the ground. I think that's so true with something like critical, where we add up all the critical. So we're taking bits and pieces of critical from different parcels and adding them up, right? It's not like we're calling out an individual parcel for its critical or not critical bit. Another thing that's really important, I heard a lot of ideas about digging through covenants and easements and stuff, and we don't have staff to collect new data. We can only run the model on data that the assessor's collecting. There's staff in place to track that stuff and keep track of it. We can't have a staff go dig through every covenant on every plat to find out if there's exclusions on certain properties. That's just well beyond the scope of what the model's intended to do. Again, it's not exact, and we do not have extra staff sitting around looking for something to do. When I get back to the comprehensive plan, the VBLM really works on what are called the VBLM land uses. And this is the full list of VBLM land uses. And this is what we have the assumptions tied to. So even if we switch to a zoning based model and a zoning overlay based model, we would still have to map every zoning category into one of the land uses you see here on the screen. We do add new land uses. We did that as part of the bill pack. We added the new mixed use commercial and the mixed use city center to deal with development that's happening in downtown Vancouver, but it's a big deal. So just want everybody to understand that's how the model works. It's not even comp plan, it's the aggregation of comp plan. The other thing I want to touch in is people get confused on model timing. And I think it's gotten pretty clear. I talked about it being the 2021 VBLM. When I say that, the 2021 VBLM is like 2021 property taxes, right? Today, we're starting to talk about 2022 property taxes. They're due, right? So with that in mind, like the first time we can run a model is January 1, 2021, right? That's just like your 2021 property taxes don't get sent out until February 14th of 2021. And the values on that is based on the 2020 assessed value for the 2021 taxes. And that 2020 assessed value is all the way back at the beginning of January 1st, 2020. So your values are a year old when I do the model. That's just the way they work. Parcels are actually at the end of the year. They happen at the end of the year, and that's nice because we get all the new plats in there. So just wanted to give you a little bit of a heads up on how the timing works. This is how it's always worked. Just wanted to let you know. All right, so now that's the updates I wanted to give. Now I'm just going to quickly go through what I provided before. And really, we talked about this being a QA/QC, quality assurance, quality control of how I classified things, because we had a lot of new classifications out there. And what I do is I look at the results on the map, and I compare that aerial photography, and then I look at the buildings, I look at the assessor's database, then I try and symbolize things so it's easy to see outliers. And then I've really added all the supporting data into the pop-up so you can really drill in and see how I got to that conclusion. And I also review all the well-known areas that we've talked about for many years here at this point. Again, looking at the historical vacant lands map in Maps Online, you can see I've selected a parcel, and over on the left, you can see that's all the attributes it shows. It's residential vacant, it's urban low density. That's about all it says. I can't figure out, there's no value cutoffs or anything there that shows me how I arrived at that conclusion. As part of the build pack, it really, and other things going on, really drove that we need to rewrite the model from pretty much the ground up using modern software, modern development practices, make the data more transparent, make sure I'm using the best available assessor's data, make sure that the classifications are adhering to the adopted criteria from the board at last June. And then really one of the big drivers for this is we have this redevelopment, which said that everything that used to what was not vacant or underutilized was put into built. And now I have to tease built out into what's really excluded versus what's is eligible for redevelopment. So that really drove a lot of the new classifications you see in terms of defining what's excluded and what's really not. With that, I released 3 of the QA/QC maps that I've been using to review my work. And that included the vacant underutilized land, which is similar to our traditional map, but I also showed you some classifications I've been playing with to kind of tease apart what's built and what's excluded. And if something's excluded, go into the detail, why are you excluded? More than just, yes, you're excluded. I want to know why you're excluded. So with that, we released the map. I wanted to show you real quick how to use the map. So with that, we showed the vacant buildable lands layers here. And there's quite a long legend there, so you can scroll down if you need to. You can change the transparency on the layer to make the classification pop out more if you want. You can also change the scale at what the pop-ups show up or not. That's a little bit buggy. We talked about that. I've tried to make that work everywhere now. Here you can see I've clicked on that same parcel, and now you can see a lot more detail about it. You can see the land use, the detail type, the model, and you can actually scroll down on this and you can actually see if it's excluded. You can see the building value. You can see some parcels, just have the parcel building value, but if you have mobile homes or condos, you want all the buildings summed up. Then you can see the building value cutoff. The difference between the building value cutoff and the building value to see this is negative, that means it's vacant. The BVA stuff, that means it's underutilized. If the BVA delta is negative, the building value per acre, that means it qualifies as underutilized by the value. It doesn't necessarily meet the size criteria for underutilized. Down at the bottom of that, pop-up, you can see the 3 dots. If you click on that, it makes a table view of those same attributes where you're able to turn the fields on or off and change the order if you want. We also added it so you can see the roads and road labels. There's also the ability to choose the base map, which gives you even more flexibility in terms of seeing where you are and what maps are on there. So there's a lot to play with there. So one of the new classifications we have in the VBL, the vacant lands map, is looking at this excluded. So now I'm showing lots that are excluded and they would otherwise be vacant or underutilized if they weren't excluded. So that's more important. Like lots less than 5,000 square feet are excluded, but I can't, if I showed every lot that's less than 5,000 square feet that had a house on it, it's not really excluded, it's built. It just can't build a new house on that. So some of these are really helpful. You can see this one shows that riding stables and arenas are excluded. That's an old criteria called the Assessor's property type list that excludes things like riding stables and golf courses and assisted living facilities. So that's one of those examples where I made this a little more transparent because those were just kind of disappearing back in the past. They would just look built. So now looking at the excluded one, you can see all the different ways things get excluded. They get excluded like that stable did because it's an excluded assessor property type. We have sites, we have tax exempt, we have small lots, easements, parks, utilities, and zero value lots, which is kind of a broad category that it picks up a lot of stuff we used to have, like tracks and whatnot. Just says, you know, if the assessor says it's zero value, nobody's paying taxes on it, it gets excluded. So this one looks more at the built, and our traditional map looks almost all at the vacant. This one wants to look more, what are we calling built? It's kind of split again between built and excluded. I'm showing the built with houses and built without houses. And I think looking at this in Ridgefield, we noticed a lot of issues on the right-hand side of the map here, where you can see some weird stuff going on where there's doing residential development on industrial, and then there's residential development happening on commercial. And again, this is comp plan based because Ridgefield's kind of done some stuff with overlays and zoning that allows that, but that didn't get back in the model because we need to make that a comp plan based thing. So that really helps identify issues that I can then go say, that's an outlier, what's going on? Another part of the VBLM that's always kind of been lost is that we have this thing called sites or parcels that are assessed with each other, or a grouped parcel. And this is really common on commercial where you have a lot of small lots and they just leave those lots there and build a new building on top. They don't go through and combine them all together again. And we used to just say if things were grouped together, they get a pass on the building value criteria. We just say you're built. And so that's the way it is, but now we can actually see on the map all the things that get that pass on the building value criteria. We can also see they're not really excluded. They just got the pass on the building value criteria. This is exactly the case where these guys are available for redevelopment. They're not really excluded. And that, again, you gets into the small lot thing then. So we have those lots less than 5,000 square feet that are built. Well, they're eligible for redevelopment. That's my call. Versus if you're a vacant lot that's less than 5,000 square feet, you're still excluded because no one's managed to build on you yet. So I guess they can't in the future either. So this is a great way to kind of get a handle on how the model's working again. I think is a useful map. It's one that I use a lot. And here you can say where I've actually got the site building value and I've got the site building value per acre. So I've put that into the data now, and we could in theory change and start using the building value criteria on these. That wasn't possible in the past because it was hard to get at, but now I've gotten it and put it there and we can look at it. And this is one of those rules. If we said, hey, let's start using the site building value and using those, that would be an easy one to turn on. Most any other new rules is going to be hard, but we can turn rules off. So that's my quick run through on that, Jose. If you want any questions, I can answer them or go back to some of those slides.
Okay. If you guys want to use the raise hand feature, if you have any questions for Bob about the model or anything that you observed in looking at the mapping, this would be a good time to ask. David McDonald.
Jose, I may not, I'm not sure I have a question about the mapping. I'm just wondering, is there going to be more presentation before the general Q&A for everyone? Or is that staff where you're done?
We're pretty much done.
Okay.
Yep.
Then I have two questions for Bob.
Mm-hmm.
One is, you mentioned forecast to actuals, which was something that we talked about at BuildPack a little bit. Can you tell me, when you went through all of this data and created all of these new maps, it was hard for me to understand, but can you look at historical data and say, what were our forecasts like in 2015, and what are our actuals that match up to that in terms of the development that we have? I mean, we under the model, we forecast so much and we either met it or didn't meet it or exceeded it. Can we say that based upon these maps?
Good question. So part of the rewrite was to be able to run historical models. That's kind of late in the game to go run historical models. I've just been doing that this week. So I've run the models back from 2015 forward. So we now have an apples to apples comparison historically. The way that we've done it, kind of the forecast to actuals, is look at just the change in acres and vacant underutilized, right? If we have fewer acres, we assume so many houses got built. And we can, that's kind of how we can do, how many, that's the forecast. This is how many disappeared, how many houses should there have been, and then compare that to the number of assessors' houses out there. We've looked at that various ways, and there's some challenges to it. One of the things we've realized is that, like, market factor, for example, is this land that's not going to develop because people aren't willing to sell it in the time frame. Well, the land that's, you can't look at land that's built and apply a market factor to it, because that's the land that's built. It's not the land that got left out. So you kind of have to take the market factor out. And I go to a lot of detail. We've looked at ways of doing forecast actuals. I think it's possible, but we've not really settled on an agreed upon way to do that. We didn't get to that with the BuildPack either, where we said this is our forecast actuals.
So we talked about it, but I don't think we ever got there.
Never settled on one. We've run some examples and stuff, but we've never settled on one.
Okay, that's all I have right now. I'd like to think about a couple other questions and then I'll get back to you.
Okay, sure. Jennifer Baker, then Ron Barca.
Hi there. Good afternoon, everyone. So I have a specific question, and I think it gets to the zoning versus comp planning disparity. In a parcel like Section 30 in the VBLM, you just see a big rectangle that's blue, that's critical, that's industrial or critical industrial. But there is an overlay for employment center mixed use that would cut out 120 acres of that property that's likely to develop as residential. So there is, what I'm hearing from you is that there is not a tool, or there's not an adaptation in the VBLM modeling that accounts for a big disparity like that. Is that correct?
They would need to change the comp plan.
Mm-hmm.
And we said, if we switch to zoning and zoning overlays, they would still have to map back to those same land uses. But we could say we want to do that.
Okay. Second question is, it's one thing to look at the map and the color-coded legend and the parcels. Is there a structural data extraction where you have like an Excel spreadsheet of industrial parcels that aligns with the visual data?
Yeah, so in the mapping, you could see the tables there, right? I showed how to see the tables with the pop-up.
But for each individual parcel, yes, not for the entire inventory.
It would actually, you can get the whole inventory out of this data if you want, but yes, we can also provide it. At this point, what you're seeing is at the parcel level. It's actually sub-parcel. Parcels are split by critical. That's available, sure.
That would be helpful.
It's in GIS format, you know, to put it, I can put it in an Excel spreadsheet. It's going to be big.
Yeah, hopefully less big, well, not hopefully, but I imagine it would be less big on the industrial footprint specifically. I don't have GIS specific software to be able to navigate like some of the planners and engineers on the calls. So my interest would be looking at what is aggregate industrial land versus what is sort of salt and pepper parcels all over the place. Thank you.
Okay, Ron?
Yeah, thanks. So Bob, I'm hoping in the excluded legend, you can put some words to tax exempt and the zero value lot. So I can have a kind of a better understanding of how they ended up that way.
Sure. So
Tax exempt,
tax exempt is a classification from the assessor's office. So that's schools, churches, federal county buildings. They have tax exempt, but the assessor puts a building value and a property value on it. So, but they don't get any taxes. And we exclude most tax exempt. We have added some tax exempt back in. So like affordable housing got added back in. We also found that the port was building on commercial and residential now. So we put that back in for commercial and residential. And that's different from like a tract in a parcel or in a plat. It's not really tax exempt. It just has zero value. There's no land value. There's no building value. And that's nice because then it doesn't have to meet tax exempt criteria and there's no taxes on it. So those are, like I say, those are parcels that really you can't develop. They've decided it has zero value for various reasons and they're allowed to do that, but they're not tax exempt. But no tax statement goes out. If you have value on land that's not tax exempt, someone gets a tax statement. And a lot of the zero value stuff could still be the original developer on a tract, or it could be the homeowners association. And if a tax statement goes out on that, no one's paying it. And that just is a nightmare for the county because now they have a tax bill no one paid on and they've got to go fix that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. So zero value, that's the current state. And going forward, it's all we can plan around, but it isn't necessarily something that couldn't change hands or be redeveloped or developed in the future.
I think it'd be hard to develop. These are the tracts and subdivisions. They're little parcels that nobody owns anymore, really. They're mostly tracts and subdivision. Private
okay,
roads.
that's the vast majority of them.
Sit on a parcel.
Yes, and some of them may be stormwater facility of something, and some of them may just be tracked for utilities, easement or whatever. So if there's no value on it, it's likely that it will not develop.
Oh, okay, that's helpful right there. Thank you, Oliver.
You're welcome.
Let's see. David, do you have another question or just nope? Or you still have your hand up?
Sorry, Jose, I forget to take my hand down.
All right. Does anybody have any other questions for Bob?
I have one more for Bob, if I can.
Sure.
So Bob, when you run this model, did you run it to look at things like land that we've used for parks and schools or changes in that over the last 10 years? Or, I mean, was there anything that you did in terms of numbers on that kind of thing?
So that's the new assumption that 20% of residential turns into schools and parks.
Right.
And we did do a review of that on schools and found that's just not true. There's really no new schools and parks, school lands showing up. That's much easier than parks. Parks are a little harder because cities typically say they own the land. I can't figure out what's a park and what's not. But that's something, in terms of doing a check here, we'd say, show me all the new schools and parks in residential. And that's not in the map. Again, we weren't asked to fact check that, so I haven't done that.
Okay, all right, thank you.
All right, thanks, Bob.
Yeah, thank you. Jose, this is Oliver.
Yeah.
Sorry, didn't raise my hand. I don't know whether it's appropriate to call individuals or not put anyone on spot, but if we want to do that for this, Bob is going to stay with us throughout the hour. So, but if we want to call individuals if they have questions before we go to questions and answers, that would be acceptable. If not, we move on to question and answers. We have some time, we may not use the entire 2 hours, but that's just something that I'm putting on the table. If we can do that, if anyone has questions, why Bob is here and focusing on this aspect of our stakeholder meeting, I would say go ahead. I can see Eric Galimo's hand up. So Jose, I'll turn it over to you again.
Thank you. Go ahead, Eric.
Just a quick question. We had talked kind of during the process of a way to, when we do a feasibility in the field and we see something that varies, because it would take a tremendous amount of time and resource to kind of ground truth everything that you've done. You've done a fantastic job with the resources you have, and it's great information. Sometimes, like you said, things like covenants, you don't know. There's no way for you to know that. There's no way for staff to check it. But when we're doing a feasibility, we might see something like that. So is there a way where we could report to you that, okay, this property is actually not developable, it'll never develop because there's a covenant on the property, or some other thing that we discovered during a feasibility study, it should be removed? I mean, it's not going to affect it immediately, but cumulatively, we'd have a way of adjusting those. So next time you looked at the model, those little pieces incrementally have an impact. Is there a way to do something like that?
I think the challenge is always, how do you maintain that? So we find that, you could say that this parcel won't develop, and you give me a parcel number and it's 10 acres. And the next thing you know, they split off 5 acres of it. And the 5 that keeps the original PID is just perfect for building. And the other 5 is they split off the piece that won't develop. And now we have the piece that will develop in the database that say it won't develop. So that's something we saw in Ridgefield before, where they were reconfiguring parcels and things were vacant, underutilized, excluded, because they were reconfiguring parcels. So I guess it gets to the question of, how do we maintain that?
I think we kind of talked about the example, kind of like FEMA does for floodplain maps. As something changes on a parcel, as circumstances change, you submit something called a LOMAR, a letter of map revision, and it gets incorporated in the maps. And they don't get updated often, but they're on file. And then once they release the new maps, they incorporate those new lines.
So if we walk through that and say, you submit a parcel and say, this one, Eric Galamo says this can't develop, and then that goes through a split or a merge. So then do we send that back to you to review it and tell us if you still think that of the new parcel configuration?
Well,
or
I think it self-corrects, doesn't it? Because if for some reason it does.
It's on the list of never develops. So someone needs to take that off the list of never develops.
But if it does develop, then it's already developed, correct? And then it becomes new inventory. Correct? So it's no longer.
Once it develops, then it's developed, but it's still on the list that will never develop.
Yeah, well, and that is the thing. Like the one that I submitted just one example because we looked at a feasibility and there was a covenant on it. And granted, there is probably a way that you could remove that covenant, but it requires going through all the existing homeowners. And the reality was not going to happen. So there's a parcel on there that's set is underutilized. It looks like great development property, but that covenant limits any future development in the area. And there's not a lot of those, but there's a handful. Right. But that's just one example. So
We're in
Yep.
the same boat that this is a general estimate and we get down to the specifics like this, and it's a lot of expense for not much improvement in the
Okay.
quality of the result.
And this is Oliver, Eric. In addition to Bob's response, yeah, remember that we are constantly monitoring and running the report every year as new information becomes available, or as the assessors goes out there and do their thing, and then we run the model. I believe, Bob, correct me if I'm wrong, January or February of every year. And again, we provide that information out to the cities and anyone else that wants to see that. As I continue to say, we don't publish that report or publish the VBLM report until we get feedback. So that's what we have been doing and will continue to do so. I think, Eric, what I would say is that in some cases, the covenant, as you admit, it might take time, but, those are private covenant, and anything could happen. But over time, we'll be monitoring that to see what is going on. The other issue is, as Bob was saying, if you say this is not going to be feasible, that's different that it's not going to develop. For someone, it may not pencil out. That's different than, characterizing that property as not going to be ever developed. There are so many classes of developers out there who may find 2 or 3 short plots and do it, and there may some that may say, oh, it doesn't worth my time. So there's different ways to look at this going forward, but we will always constantly capture what is happening over time. So let me stop there. It look like Brian and Jennifer may have their hands up. Jose, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, Brian, go ahead.
Well, first, just thanks for all this work, Bob, and all of county staff for putting the meeting together and doing the QA and the QC. And I guess I appreciate also the clarification that this isn't really ground truthing the model as a whole. This is, I think you said it best, QA, QC, and there's a lot of issues when we look at whether an individual property is zoned a particular way or shown a particular way on the map that the model doesn't capture and that are driven by the assumptions. So I just hope that's made clear going forward, because I think at the last discussions I heard at the county council level, there was this idea that ground truthing was really sort of checking out the whole model, and I don't think that's what it is. And so I also just wondered, given the work that you guys have done, and now you've received some of those individual parcel ground truthing input from folks, when do you think you'll have an estimate of the next version, a new capacity estimate for all the jurisdictions? And, of course, we're interested in for Vancouver, but when will that information be available, the updated capacity estimates about?
Well, you've received the most recent ones. It hasn't changed much since then at all.
Okay, so it's not really going to change too much. Okay. All right, and I think, as everyone knows, our concern is that the current results are just dramatically different than our reality on the ground, and so if I think we need to look at the assumptions to change that, and not just some of the individual ground truthing. And so, we've raised this point. We have not gotten any pushback that I'm aware of that the Vancouver numbers are at all accurate, and so that's obviously our concern going forward. I don't want to belabor the point because everyone's heard it, but. We're just very concerned that the Vancouver capacity estimates are off by several orders of magnitude on the residential side. So again, though, thanks for the work for today and the QA QC work.
Brian, this is Oliver. Thank you for that observation. And Bob, when we get to the next steps, we will probably touch base on the issues that you're raising, and I'm not guaranteeing that we will run it a different model or something, because I know while Vancouver is making the observation, which everyone will recognize in terms of redevelopment that is occurring in the city and what is in the pipeline. Those are some of the things that I know it was brought up at the committee level meeting, and the group kind of went on the conservative side. So I get that, we will take a look at this, when we get all the feedback. I know certainly some of these issues are, some of the cities are also raising that, but not at the same magnitude as the city of Vancouver is, because again, due to policy decisions and allowing overlays on commercial and industrial area, whether it's floating mixed use or whatever, I'm not blaming anyone, but what we are seeing, not unique to only Vancouver, but we are seeing commercial or residential development in commercially zoned land, and in some cases in industrial land where you have a mixed use overlay. So in that case, you're going to underestimate capacity. If that were to continue, and some folks have asked me, this is editorial on my part, why have we grown this much and we are still within the 1994 urban growth boundary? And my answer to that have always been that we are seeing development occurring in areas where we never expected it to occur, be residential particularly. So I don't disagree with your observation, but it's something that, following the input from the city of Vancouver and other cities, which I have seen some of the comment, we might take a look at it, and we may ask the cities to help us in how to reassess the comp plan designation going forward. By that, I mean, do we apply or come to the council and ask, given what is happening and what we're observing, to do a 60-40 split for some of this land out there, or whatever the percentage may be? I don't know what the answer will be at this point, but thank you for the observation. I'll stop there.
Okay.
Your hands up.
I don't see any other hands up. I think I just, one of the questions I received was related to the cities and having either land in urban holding or land that's been in the jurisdictions for a long time. Either they're constrained, and so just want to hear if any of the cities have any comments about lands that are within their UGAs and sort of long-term plans to have the infrastructure in place to serve those properties over the 20-year horizon. I think this was something that we discussed earlier on. I didn't hear anything from the cities having any concerns about being able to serve any of those lands, but I just wanted to put that out there again.
Jose, just for clarification, what was the call to the cities? Is this just in the last 2 weeks of model analysis, or did the county reach out to the cities specifically to ask that input?
Yeah, early on in the process when we were having our bill pack meetings, one of the questions was, do the cities envision any inability to serve the areas within their urban growth areas to serve those properties within the next 20 years? And they were they sort of confirmed that they were able to do that. They didn't envision having a problem. And so I think we've reported that back to the advisory committee. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there again. I think saw Robert Mall have his hand up.
I was just gonna, we don't have any foreseeable issues with our current UGA. So
thanks, Robert.
Right, Jennifer, this is Oliver. If I may add, I recall that conversation within the advisory committee meeting. One of the requirements in the new modification to the buildable lands is what the legislature, or what they were calling infrastructure gap. And that's how that question came about. So we reach out to the cities to confirm.
Very well. So that would look at things like the capacity of the pump stations and sewer out in surrounding Battleground. And Battleground, in your estimates, has confirmed that they have the capacity to serve that land in the next 20 years with the affiliated infrastructure is the conclusion.
I believe, yeah, that's my understanding, that within the remaining planning horizon, depending on what direction they're marching, that they have the capacity, or they will have the capacity to serve those areas that are within their urban growth boundaries.
This is Sam from Battleground. Yeah, well, generally speaking, yeah, we have the capacity to serve our urban growth boundary. You know, our capital facilities plans always need to correlate with our land use plan. It's not to say it's easy. It's often challenging. Often the heavy lifting can be put on the development community to get some of those larger pump stations and things like that built. But overall, I think the model is fine as is.
Thank you, Sam.
Okay. There any other questions or any other discussion about any of the issues? It's like the other issue that's kind of come up is the critical lands. And I think we've had some conversation in the model, how we deal with that, where we identify, we use the same critical lands layer that we use when we're trying to sort of assess indications of potential critical land. So a lot of times there are indicators that not necessarily to when development comes in or applications come in to sort of go out and actually really ground truth and see if there's a wetland there, not just hydric soils as an example. So a lot of the times what we find is that over time, the areas that we've identified as critical have development on them. And so we know that we're sort of overestimating critical lands to a certain degree. And then there's critical lands that may have been in the inventory for a long time, certain properties that nothing's happened in a while. And I know that we previously had sort of a hierarchy in terms of our industrial land, but we got some pushback on that in classifying certain lands as tertiary or less likely to develop. And so that we changed the model away from that. So I don't know if anyone has anything to add related to critical lands and how that's being handled in the model. Brian?
Yeah, just a follow-up question. I mean, just making sure I understand what you're saying correctly, because, correct me if I'm confusing my assumptions here, but I thought the critical lands assumption is unchanged, that at least the county council direction, the county council decision back last June didn't change the critical assumption. Is that right?
That's correct.
Oh,
that's
okay.
correct.
Okay. That's correct. Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
Sam?
I was going to add, there's been a few cases where I've taken what the model shows for critical set-asides, and then I've done my own exercise after land's been platted in a few cases. And I found the model to be pretty accurate. Like, if anything, like you said, the model probably shows a little more critical lands than what ends up being developed, just because critical areas regulations do allow for impacts to wetlands in some cases, and but otherwise I found the models fine. I don't have anything to say in that regard.
Okay. So Oliver, do you have anything?
No, I don't. I'm not sure where we are on our agenda.
I think we're just in the.
Are we still in question and answers?
Yes.
Or are you reporting also in what we heard from comments that we received from those that have submitted comment of taking a look at the map?
Right, and I think I had sort of Bob addressed
those already.
Sort of those holistically. Mm-hmm.
Okay. No, I don't have anything else. I just want to, see what folks' concerns are, and before we get into the next steps.
Just
mm-hmm.
Thanks, Jose. Just quickly, under next steps, are we going to be able to ask if you will include things in the next steps, or are you just going to be telling us what you're going to do in the next steps? That's my question.
Well, we have so a couple things. I think the feedback that I've received to date, I'll put together and put on our webpage. Comments, questions, criticisms people have of the model. And then really what we're scheduled to do is go back to council in April at our April 19th. They've continued the hearing to that date, and then we will report back on what the results of the feedback that we gotten, and then of sort of this discussion, and see where the council, how the council would like to proceed.
Okay, so this really isn't our opportunity to say, hey, you guys should do X, Y, and Z. Now that we're going through the process, we're just going to, we're trying to understand, you're trying to help us understand what you've done so far and where you're going to go, and give us an opportunity to ask questions. It's sort of a Q&A informative thing right now.
Right. Yeah.
Got it. Okay, thank you. I won't be making demands then.
Great.
David, this is Oliver. We're not going to preclude anyone from submitting any comments. And I don't think that's what Jose is saying. We're not going to preclude anyone from submitting comments. We just want to share with you and hear from our stakeholders what are their concerns. But we're not going to preclude anyone from submitting additional comment or asking the council.
No, I understand that.
Yeah. No, we're not going to.
I understand that.
Yes.
Yeah, I understood that exactly. Is that we're still in a process where they're telling us, staff is giving us sort of a play-by-play of what's going on, how it's doing, what you've been doing, and we have the ability to continue to comment up through and including the next council hearing, I'm sure. Yeah, I understand that. I just was wondering what we're talking about today in terms of next steps. And I think Jose—
You're cutting out there.
I'm sorry. Could be my internet connection. What I understood Jose to say is that today is a time for staff to tell us what they believe the next steps will be between now and the council hearing, not to ask us in general public what we think that it ought to be. If we have other things and comments to make, we should continue to make those for the general record, but not necessarily here today. And I understand that. Thanks, Oliver. I appreciate the clarification.
Oh, you're welcome. And, for internal staff, we will be talking also among ourselves to see what is possible, or whether that would be just what we'll be doing as part of monitoring and what happens going forward. Because the grant routing is going to be continuous, and I welcome that. So we'll have internal conversation and be able to put that as part of our recommendation or our presentation to the council.
Again, thanks, Oliver. I really appreciate that.
Welcome, sir.
Are there any other questions about that? Where we're going? Brian?
I just had a question on the timing leading up to the next hearing. I mean, so that I assume there will be a staff report for the hearing out, more or less 10 days or whatever before the hearing.
Yeah, I think I will put something together that summarize what was done and the comments received, and sort of the essentially kind of the response to that, or categorizing why, how it impacts the model, and discuss with Bob how to put that to the council.
Okay. And I guess just to, I think I sort of said this earlier, but if there's having an updated version of the draft, if there is to be any updates to the draft, the numbers and the text of the buildable lands report would certainly help. I guess what we'd like to avoid is a situation where, we say that, as we have said, that the Vancouver estimates are profoundly inaccurate, and then the response might be that, well, there's still the various ground truthing hasn't come in, and that might fix it. And I don't think it will, and I don't think that's what I'm hearing from you guys, that the ground truthing will. But I just hope that in the hearing environment that's clear, that it's that the things are somewhat settled, if you follow.
Right, and I think we can clarify that your concerns aren't really addressed through that. It's only revisiting the assumptions that the council adopted back in June. Eric?
So what exactly will we be recommending, or what will you guys be recommending to council for adoption at the next hearing? Because I feel like at the last one it was continued, and it was continued primarily so the city and the Responsible Planning Commission coalition could kind of work out some differences and figure out how to more accurately represent housing in the model and what the demand was. And I don't know that we really came to a consensus. I think we understand the issue a little bit better, and I think I personally do understand what the city's saying, that yes, we are seeing some residential development in the downtown core, in multifamily developments in commercial zones, things like that. And it has a place in the model. I'm not going to disagree with that. I think what we talked about was that meets a certain percentage of our need in the community. And I guess the concern that we had on the coalition was that if you overcount that, you do it at the expense of other housing types, and you do it at the expense of potentially the culture and the feel of the neighborhood or feel of the community.
Yeah,
so
could you explain to me how?
How?
Yeah, because what all the model is doing is reflecting what's happening, especially in downtown Vancouver. So I'm not sure how accounting for that affects anything else anywhere else.
Well, I think what we're seeing is right now, this report and this model and the recommendations are basically saying we have an excess of capacity and we have an excess of buildable lands in our community. Now, okay, that's what it's saying. What that the result of that.
Wait, but based on the population projection that was done in 2016 that
Okay.
that you continually argue is too low. And based on the density achievements, especially in Vancouver, that are 2.5 times what we're planning for.
So I think what's missing, and kind of what we talked about, was that there are there's different needs in the community. So we have vacant lands available for, say, commercial. We have vacant lands available for residential. We have vacant lands available for light industrial. And then we have vacant lands for just residential in one group. Now, there's differences. I mean, we'll always be able to hit our target by increasing density and building up. And that's kind of, I think, how we're proposing to do it with this plan. But there are some policy implications, and I guess that's what the concern is that we're not separating the types of residential and then the distinct needs in the community for those types of residential. And by overestimating that high density residential over commercial areas, those are apartments, and they're not necessarily low cost apartments either. They tend to be fairly expensive to construct compared to, say, garden style apartments. So, you look at things like, a lot of the downtown development, it's pretty expensive for the square footage you get, where the corresponding cost of, say, a garden style apartment out in Hazeldale or in Salmon Creek is significantly less per square footage. So there's different needs, and by lumping them all together, by overestimating one, we're showing that we have plenty of available capacity in our existing model and existing urban growth boundary. But the reality is we have an excess for a particular type of housing. We do not necessarily have an excess for other needs in the community, and that's what's not really split out in the model right now. And we talked about it, and I think even city staff, when we were going, it's like, that's a good idea. I don't know if we have the ability to do that, especially in the time frame we have. But so, I think it's an issue.
Right. So I think the part of the legislation that was passed is going to require us, the next time we do this buildable lands report, is to break out that different residential by not so much housing type, but like the range affordability. So we're going to look at these things broken out in a lot of different ways when we update this. And as part of the comprehensive plan update, we're going to need to work with the cities to sort of identify what those breakpoints are for different affordability levels. And I think that will address some of the concerns that you're raising. Because, yeah, right now it's sort of lumped together, but overall, most of the land that we have is for single family detached housing. I mean, overwhelmingly.
And that's
it's
where the
not even
demand
close.
is.
What?
That's where the demand is in our community as well, though.
Yeah, and but that's what the model's reflecting. What it's not reflecting is the density increases that are happening in downtown, and some of the changes that are allowing some of those apartments in commercial, in Vancouver, in Ridgefield, in Washougal, in Camas, where we've never seen that before.
So there was another report. Let me kind of quote a few lines out of it. This is you can't see it here, but it's the Housing Inventory and Analysis, Clark County, Unincorporated, Vancouver area. It was done by Eco Northwest, February 2021, and a few kind of quotes out of their study. Page 9, it says, housing production has been steady since the mid-2010s, but the study area still has not produced enough housing to meet demand. Based on the ratio of housing units produced and new households formed in the study area over time, there has been an underproduction of 2,571 units. So then on page 41, like in Clark County, home prices in the study area are increasingly out of reach of middle-income households looking to buy. Page 43, households at the lower or middle part of the income spectrum often have no choice but to pay increasingly high rents because homeownership is out of reach. Page 47, Clark County will need to plan for 13,281 new dwelling units within the study area through 2035 to address the study area's underproduction of housing and develop new housing demanded by the population growth. That's what's said by this study. However, this report here is saying not only do we have plenty of land, we have an excess of land, and we're not even recording all of the capacity we have. So there's some kind of disconnect between reality, because I don't know, maybe you guys see it differently, but from what I'm seeing in the field, we are seeing a significant shortage of developable land that is cost effective to develop. And we're seeing a super high demand for housing. The time on the market and the availability is, at a record low. And we see a significant affordability issues. None of those really jive with the recommendation that we have plenty of capacity and we don't need more added to our urban growth boundary. That's kind of the challenge I'm seeing. And I'm not sure where in the data the disconnect is, because I don't think your numbers are off. I think they are what they are, and they're great data, but there's something that's missing and some kind of factor that's not driving with, I guess, the reality that we're seeing in the field. Or maybe it's pointing in a direction where it changes the character of our community. I think we are seeing a lot of residential development in commercial lands because that's the only place we can put it. And that's the only place we can house our community, because we do have a shortage of land in residential zones. So that's kind of, I guess, the concern. I'm not sure I have the total solution. The best suggestion I had was to split it out by type and to look at, instead of saying that we have an excess of land, we can say we have an excess of commercial land that we can put multifamily in. We have a shortage of multifamily suburban land. We have a shortage of single family land that's readily developable for, middle income households. So that is the best suggestion I had. So sorry for taking so long, and I'll yield the floor.
Thanks, Eric. Brian or David?
Go ahead. David had his hand up first.
Okay.
Just to the point that you were making, Jose, my remembering is that throughout our jurisdiction, we are at generally at 70 to 75% single family detached housing. And that's reflected in the model. Am I close to a number there?
Seems about right.
Okay. So overwhelmingly in Clark County, we have already a large emphasis. 3/4 of the county is single family detached. And I think the other point I want to make is, Eric, is definitely on the ground and does work, but the model is supposed to not make policy decisions, is my understanding. It is supposed to just accurately reflect what is there. And if it accurately reflects what is there, then decisions can be made later in terms of zoning or policy changes or whatever it is. But right now, isn't the model just supposed to actually just skip policy and go right to data? If I'm wrong, please let me know.
No, I think, I think it's supposed to reflect based on the criteria that we have for what's vacant and underutilized, and apply the sort of planning assumptions, at an aggregate level, and give us sort of a capacity estimate over a 20-year period. So there could be stretches in time where, I think one of the things that I've been reading about is that, one of the problems with the lack of inventory is the existing housing market, where existing homes aren't going up for sale. And I think that would affect also those underutilized properties that we have most of, where there's an existing house on. And if people aren't willing to sell those, then that creates this pressure where you're not seeing a lot of land available to develop.
But what we've seen since I've been in the county, we've seen development ebb and flow. We've seen places where we've had, a strong housing market, and we've seen equally amount of times where we've had a weak housing market. And just because we have a strong housing market today doesn't mean we'll have a strong housing market over the entire 20-year period. And that's why the data is there to reflect what we have, what Bob was talking about, which are, forecast actuals. I assume that's true.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't off base.
Yeah. Brian?
Just a couple of clarifications about what's going on in Vancouver development wise, and also at least our view of what the model is supposed to do. In terms of in Vancouver, well, one thing is that the recent development primarily, but not only multifamily, is it's not just a downtown thing. And we included in the record our most recent listing of multifamily applications coming in, and they're all over the place. I think the majority are in fact outside of downtown now. So it's not just a downtown thing, and it's also not just a high-rise thing. In a lot of those cases, it's some of those are taking place on commercial lands. Some of those are taking place on multifamily zoned lands, and we allow single-family housing if it meets the density to develop on multifamily land. The lands that come in on commercial lands, many or most really are mixed-use projects, but they're not all single building with multifamily above retail. Some of them are larger site with a single family component. So the idea that the development on commercial lands in Vancouver is all high rise and not contributing to owner occupied stock is not backed by the data. Another point is that, just to, I guess, to concur with what I think everyone said, is that the model is not a policy document. It's meant, I think Oliver described it as an inventory in one of the recent county council meetings, and I think that's accurate. If you look at the legislation that created it, it does talk about a number of issues in terms of affordable housing, but it also has other places for that to be addressed. It directed the Department of Commerce to do some work and have additional studies and so forth. And so I think we're kind of conflating things when we talk about policy implications, which are certainly going to be part of the land supply discussion and the choosing of growth forecasts. But that's in our view, and not just us as planners, as attorneys at the City of Vancouver as well, that's not what this model is supposed to do. And so I guess there's some concern that that's continued to be part of the discussion. It has been part of the discussion at the county council, and that's I would like to hear from county. I'd like to hear from the county law about this, about what their view is of the inventory, or excuse me, of the model, because certainly we don't see it that way. And so that's part of our concern going forward, is that we need to have accurate numbers to do this part of the comprehensive planning right. And then when we talk about growth forecasts, we can have the much wider ranging policy discussion.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you, Brian. This is Oliver. I think, in terms of the report itself, and I think this is a very good conversation or discussion. I don't anticipate that the report will change in terms of the actual development that have occurred on the ground to date, or within the time frame we are looking at. And in that case, I believe we captured the density achieved. We captured the ratio of multi-family and single family, as David was quoting earlier. So that part of the report will not change. Now, if, and I use the word if, no one is asking the council at this point to, and I think Bob said it very well, no one is asking the council to revisit the assumptions or the decisions or the direction that they gave to staff, including GIS staff, on June 29th. If you, the cities and any other stakeholders, are able to convince the council to revisit the assumptions, then we still have some time. This is April. Can't speak for the council. We will have some time to run the model differently and present that information in the report. Now, I concur that there appear to be some mix and match in what the legislature required with policy conversation, yes, we acknowledged that we are looking at the population that was chosen in 2015 or 2000 during the last comp plan update. We all recognize that that population was low and chosen at a time of great recession, if you will. We all know that OFM have come back and updated that. That was not unique to Clark County. That applied to all the other counties that prepared their plans in the last time go around. So I am inclined to say that it would be better to focus this conversation on actually what we are observing on the ground and reporting on that. That's what the legislature called for us to do, or the legislature that passed or amended 215, which is the 52-54. That's what we are supposed to do. So we can have a conversation about, should it be 2% population growth going forward? If the cities in the future or through some policy changes decide not to allow, residential development occurring on commercial or other non-commercial, non-job or non-residential or job-related comp plan designation, that is something we can revisit. This report is not going to stop with this version. There's going to be another one in 5 years, so we will report on that. Whether I'm here to report on that, I don't know, but that's what this is all about. When we are conflicting it with policy issues, we are just modeling the issue.
Thank you, Oliver. Okay. Any other issues anyone would like to bring up at this point? Like I said, we are having a hearing, was continued to April 19th. And so we will be going back to council and providing them an update of the information that we've received with the mapping that Bob has put out there. And then the comments we've received and what we'll be doing going forward. Eric?
Yeah, so and I touched on it before, one of the reasons why we got continued is because council asked the City of Vancouver and the Responsible Planning Coalition to kind of work together and to come up with something. So can we, at that hearing, can we have presenter status instead of general public, since we were directly asked a question instead of just commenting? And I think it would be appropriate for the city as well to have a little more time and not have to be held to 3 minutes to state a lot of information.
I think I'll run that through and ask the question, and they'll let you know.
Okay,
for sure. Yeah. Is there anything, you guys? You've had one meeting, so you mentioned that you see something from their point of view. Are you guys open to making any changes to what was done previously in June to account for some of what the city would like to see, and whatever you can do as early as possible would probably be most beneficial.
Yeah, I do understand the city's position that we're seeing residential and commercial zones and in other zones, and we're seeing, a different style of development. I don't think that meets all the needs in our community, and I know it's not a policy decision with the model, but the model is information used to make policy decisions. And I guess my observation is that the information is lumped together in a way that it's difficult to make policy decisions off of. So, I already submitted some public comments and they're in the record, but I basically said, I think we should adopt it with what was there, with kind of a commitment to look at kind of splitting it by category as we move forward, because the reality is we don't have time right now. We don't have the resources to do what I think would be the best information to make a policy decision from. And that would be looking at setting a target of what percentage of our housing should be characterized certain ways, and then looking at the capacity based on that instead of lumping them all into just a density target. So by doing that, you actually can look at a vacant land by more categories than a vacant land by just an accumulated density. So that's kind of what my position was like. We at this point, we can come to consensus on a lot of things, and we shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. What we should do is kind of figure out how to make it better moving forward and make that commitment before we go to that next step and continue working on trying to split that out. So when it comes around to making that policy decision with the comprehensive plan, we have a vacant buildable lands model that is more detailed that we can make a better policy decision off of. That was I think that's kind of where I landed on it. And I don't want to further delay it. I do want to do something that, helps move this forward and goes to the next step. But that's, I guess, what I would say just to council.
Okay. So I just want to get some clarification on. So in your estimation of these categories, because I think at the bill pack, we talked a little bit about what we were looking at doing is splitting these things instead of having one density target, having something for urban high, kind of urban low, and then the commercial that's happening, the residential that's happening in the commercial, because those are different densities that we're seeing anywhere else. And it's a limited area, so we wouldn't want to apply that across the board. That makes sense. So I think what we've got in the model, we're able to do that into those sort of three different categories: the urban high, the urban low, and that commercial, or the residential and commercial that we were looking at for the city of Vancouver. So we have that capability.
Yeah. Okay. And I think that's a lot of work, and we're not ready to do that before the next meeting, before this needs to be adopted, and before it has to go to the state.
It's already broken out that way. If you look at the was it Appendix F, there's a breakout by jurisdictions, and it has that by urban low, urban high, and then the commercial areas. And if you look at the city of Vancouver, that's how it's broken out, the land that we have, and then how the capacity estimates are. But they're based on the density target of 8 as opposed to the achieved density.
Sure. So I think, instead of the report saying that we have an excess of buildable land, I think what it would say is that we have an inadequate supply of land for certain categories and an excess of land for a certain category, which is kind of that mixed use, residential and commercial. But I don't know that we have an excess for some of the other categories. That's not what we're seeing in the field.
Right, but you won't be able to, and I agree, you won't be able to make that determination because we haven't set up what those targets are for each of those categories.
Yep. Exactly. So that's, I guess, the comment is we have this data. Now we need to look at it a different way and set those targets, and then analyze the vacant buildable land based on those targets, which kind of is the next step. But I don't know how it is broken up right now, and I guess that would be useful information. And do we have that information available for that next step?
Okay.
Jose and Bob, this is Oliver. I don't think we do, unless, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think we do.
We've actually been working on the yield reports quite a bit. So we've got a whole set of charts and tables that breaks it down by comprehensive plan, by land use, by zoning, the number of forecast houses, the number of existing houses. All those charts and tables are available.
Okay. Thank you, Bob. I know you mentioned it, but I don't know that they are available now.
We've kind of been talking, so we had again, the November report was pretty early in the process. That's our first iteration. I've continued to refine that and add new charts, add page numbers, kind of taking the feedback. And that's kind of what Brian keeps saying. There's this new set of reports. Are those going to replace the stuff from November with the new set that we have?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other comments?
Jose, before you go to other comment, if I may, just broadly speaking, Eric, were your group able to meet with the city staff?
We had one meeting.
Okay, was there consensus or was this issue not resolved at all?
I wouldn't say there was resolution. What do you guys think? I think we understand each other's positions a little bit better, and we talked about ways to use the data better in the future. I think there's still some differences, I guess, on the direction and the growth patterns of the city, but I wouldn't say that either thing is wrong or right. I think there's some differences in philosophy and some challenges the way we see it, but you know, I definitely understand their position better. And you know, so Brian, what do you think?
I would agree with that. I thought, you know, we tried to summarize the meeting in our testimony of March 1st, which is it's on the grid. For some reason, it just didn't make it over to the project webpage, but it's on the county grid for March 1st. And yet there were some areas of agreement, and I think if there's more productive talk to be had, you know, let's do it prior to the 19th. But I think one of there didn't seem to be agreement that, or I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Eric, but I didn't hear any pushback, and I really haven't heard any that the Vancouver capacity estimates in the current report are way off. And I think Eric's idea of wanting to look at it, distinguishing between single and multi isn't necessarily a bad one. The statute still calls for us saying is there enough land to accommodate the population? So somehow it has to come together, but you know, having a distinction between the two, I don't think is necessarily a bad idea. It's really what the market is delivering in Vancouver right now. You know, we have those 12,000 applications that I mentioned, you know, mostly multifamily, are, you know, not city estimates. They're what developers are investing in. But I think the biggest difference seems to be about what the buildable lands report is. I think we believe as a legal matter, as a practical matter, it should be based on the extrapolation of the past data. It's not a policy document, although it informs policy. That's fair to say. It's not a policy document, and that's where we should go. So. Anyway, we tried to summarize it in our testimony, so if anyone wants to check that out, have a look at that.
Okay, thank you, Brian and Eric. Any other observation? I'm not taking over. No, Jose is still running the meeting. Chad is like, he wants to talk as well. So Jose, I'm turning it over to you again.
Okay, go ahead, Chad.
Thanks, Jose. Could we have an answer from county staff as to whether the county attorney could weigh in on this issue, as Brian suggested?
Thank you, Chad. I don't know whether legal counsel is joining us or whether she had another commitment. We will carry the message to our PA's office and see whether they will be able to comment on. And, you know, your legal counsel can also reach out to Miss Chris Cook. I may make that suggestion as well.
Okay, thanks. That's a good idea. We'll follow up on that.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Hello, I am
Okay,
present.
okay. Okay, thank you, Chris. I
Uh,
couldn't
Hi.
see anyone.
Hi,
Thank you.
Chris.
Hi there. So I would suggest that the city talk to the city attorney about your legal question. And I will discuss with planning what the county's viewpoint might be.
And thank you, Chris. Like I said, I couldn't see who is on, so thank you very much.
Okay, yeah, we'll follow up and reach out.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jose?
Yep. Yeah. So Brian, did you have another question or comment? Okay,
No, sorry, forgot to lower hand.
no problem.
Chad may need to lower his hand. I don't know if there's anybody out there that haven't spoken and would like the opportunity to. This is your chance.
Okay, I'm not seeing anybody or hearing anyone. So yeah, if there's no other questions or comments, I guess we could end early. Oliver, do you have anything else to add?
No, again, I just want to thank everyone that are able to join us. This is a very important questions. We don't have all the answers. I will continue to say that this is an inventory, and it is not at this point for sizing of UGA. It is based on the analysis of what have happened in the existing UGA, whether that UGA was sized properly or not. We're just reporting on what have occurred. Now, there are opportunities to make changes going forward. As I said earlier, we all know that we don't have the population that we are going to be planning for. That is yet to come out from OFM. We are going to have that conversation with the cities and the council on what population to plan for and whether that will lead to expansion of the urban growth boundary. That would be speculation on our part now, but there's other component, which is the housing. And Brian, to correct me if I'm wrong, he sat on the Buildable Lands Executive Committee. Commerce came out with a housing memo, and there are recent bills that the legislature just passed requiring Commerce to continue to come out with a mechanism to address affordable housing. So while the point made about affordable housing and the scarcity of it is genuine, there's more work that needs to be done in affordable housing realm of things. We might be able to report on categories that folks may be able to afford or not afford, what the rent is and so forth. That work is being happening right now. It's not countywide, and there may be opportunity to do that work countywide. So thank you for your participation. We'll continue this conversation. What I said earlier is that the part of the report that focused on what have actually happened on the ground, that is not going to change. The only thing that could change is depending on the outcome of this conversation and what the council decide to do in the next hearing is, are we reporting the capacity accurately? That is the only area that I think could change when it comes to actual documenting the report. But other than that, I don't see any other section of the report changing as it relates to actually what have occurred on the ground. So with that, I will thank everyone Bob, thank you very much for the work that you've been doing. I will not stop without saying thank you. As I said each time, we don't manage the model. Bob manages the model, and we are like a customer to him. So at the direction of the council. So thank you, Jose. Thank you, everyone that participated. This has been a very tedious work, but stay with it. I don't know what else to say. The only thing I will add is that as we continue to go forward, if there are parcels out there that anyone identified is not going to develop, I will be the first to tell you, I don't want to tell a property owner that your property is not developable. Let me say that. I'm not going to be the one to say that. If any of them, whether an organization or an entity wants to come to us and say this property is not going to develop, you tell us why. And we find a way to work with our council, or cities find a way to see what the appropriate zoning should be. So we don't carry that, continue to carry that in the inventory. That's my last parting word. So thank you, everyone. Greatly appreciated your participation.
Thank you.
Thanks, Oliver. And thanks, county staff and everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
St. Patrick's Day.
You too.